Hello dear viewers, here is a new video that I will please you on my channel. I hope you like my story and how I told it to you. At the beginning of this intriguing story, we can see the landscape of the city of Yongchuan Huamen. This city was not prospering. Everyone lived as best they could, some surviving, others glamorizing their existence. But our hero's story was special. He decided to hang himself to escape reality. As he was slowly dying, gasping for air, he began to remember revelations from the past. In another battle, soldiers mercilessly slaughtered men with the intent to eliminate each and every one of them. Of course, the people attempted to resist, but they were powerless against such a strong army. The company's commander ordered the soldiers to ensure that no men were left, or else they would be killed. It was not a battle of soldiers. These fighters inhumanely killed civilians, children, and elderly in that locality. The ground was covered in mountains of corpses, and amid them all stood the flag symbolizing victory. Even the soldiers themselves realized they were doing something terrible by killing all those people. But orders were orders. That's how our protagonist approached a survivor, a mother holding her baby in her arms. This child was very thin because there was not enough food for anyone during that time. They had to survive. Seeing this photo, the soldier broke down in tears, realizing what he had to do. He regained consciousness and understood that he didn't have to die. He simply didn't deserve to die. The rope was choking him. His carotid artery was constricted, and he had long run out of oxygen. Struggling to get free, he began swaying from side to side, his body convulsing. Thanks to the athletic physique he had built during his time as a soldier, everything started working. Instead of continuing to sway, he decided to put his feet on the roof and push himself up. The iron to which the rope was tied came loose from the roof, along with the concrete it was screwed into. When he fell to the ground, he finally caught his breath. He started coughing and drooling, lying under the light of his only window, feeling relief as he regained his ability to breathe. There were also some syringes on the windowsill and some pills beside them, but they were useless. No matter how many times he tried to die, it wouldn't work. He had to remove the noose from his neck. It was useless and wouldn't kill him. Breaking news broke into the city in the morning. Strange creatures were found wandering around the epicenters of the great fires. According to the latest information, the city was in chaos, and the population was in a state of panic. The police were doing their best to find out the cause of the disaster. The government assured that all residents would soon find shelter and promised to deploy all forces to protect civilians and try to prevent tragic situations. Panic spread in shopping centers and all stores. People didn't know what to do. And while our hero was in one of these stores getting water, suddenly everyone started shouting for help and running away, knocking each other over. He wondered what was happening as he didn't know anything about the situation. Instead of hearing sounds, he now saw people running past the grocery aisle where he was, being chased by strange creatures attacking them with unusual weapons. These creatures were killing people, cutting off body parts, and eating them. He couldn't understand what these things were. They were the effects of the drugs he had taken yesterday. These dreadful creatures were heading in his direction, screaming, growling, and incredibly thirsty for blood. But being far from being a weakling, this kind of opponent couldn't harm him. He sent the creature's body flying through the air, but he was caught by others, although with difficulty. On an instinctual level, they realized who had the advantage in strength. This battle clearly wasn't fair. They were incredibly angry, clearly intending to attack and take revenge on their fellow creatures. Our hero remembered that he hadn't taken drugs yesterday but had tried to hang himself. So what on earth were these things? These monsters began to attack from two flanks in the hope of defeating an enemy they were outnumbered by, using a series of attacks. But our hero was not afraid of death and trusted in his abilities. So he threw a bottle at the head of one of them and immediately struck the two creatures behind him, causing both of them to literally fly away. However, the monsters continued attacking. The pain and the decreasing number of his team couldn't stop them. Our hero didn't understand what they were trying to do, so he wanted to find out from them. But his attempts were unsuccessful. He started to perform a move called a grip, trying to immobilize the creature, and threw one monster at the other. Even at this moment, he wondered if he was dreaming. Now, he decided to throw both of them aside at once, as he had the strength to do so. And he did it. All the creatures flew in a flock, hitting the ground. While just a couple of minutes ago, they were intimidating and killing people. This time, they weren't lucky. But he wasn't going to stop there. He put his foot on one of them, and then picked up a knife, saying that he had been thinking about a way to commit suicide for so long. He began to swing it, and before attacking, he added that he didn't want to end up in a hole like this now. His hand quickly approached them, and crunches and crashes were heard in that store. He stood up as if he had been defeated. 4 dead bugs lay behind him, bugs that had already killed a lot of people. The whole store was wrecked. It was as if the apocalypse had just started in a room. In another room, another man was attacked by a group of these monsters, whom he fought back with a bat. He fought them as best he could, but his strength wasn't enough to hold off 5 monsters. Where are these monsters from? What is happening? That's all he had in mind. He missed a training session and now didn't know what to do. He had to think. I remembered that while talking to someone on the street, one person asked where he had gone, and they were told that the coach wasn't feeling well, so he left early. But the first one approved the second one so that he wouldn't say nonsense and they have to bring back the coach. Then this guy said that he didn't want to do it and climbed over the fence, adding that Uncle Ben needed a good rest. They all have been training very hard. So, see you tomorrow. And then he went to have a drink before going to the internet cafe. Everything was going according to plan, and he couldn't wait for the apocalypse. How things had come to this point, when the world had changed so much. That's what he was thinking while receiving the blows. And yet, after receiving a large number of blows, he fell to the ground. It upset him a lot. Not only did he fall to the ground and now be out of position, but he also dropped the bat. Of course, the monsters couldn't miss the opportunity to dominate him, as they had been trying to knock him down for a long time. But suddenly, someone threw a frying pan at one of them, which was completely unexpected. With that throw, he hit one, but then went for the second, and it was a double play. This man started running towards them, and they saw him, and realized they had to prepare to defend themselves. It was our hero who used a screwdriver to kill them one by one without any problems. After killing the one standing, he ran towards the one he had hit with the frying pan to finish him off. They didn't pose a threat to him either, and he got over them pretty quickly. He saved that guy and told him that if he wanted to live, he had to follow him, but on one condition: to obey his orders without hesitation and not interfere. Of course, the guy replied, because he had no choice. He wouldn't have survived on his own. While they were talking, a loud scream was heard in the room, meaning someone needed help. Our hero immediately rushed to the rescue. Although the guy tried to stop him, he couldn't. He didn't understand how our hero could leave without him, so he decided to take a bat because it's better than having bare hands. He managed to catch up with him and asked why he didn't wait for him, that he wouldn't be in the way. He didn't answer. He stiffened at the sight of that horrifying muscular monster. The sight of the man trying to defend himself from this monster made our hero realize he had to act. It turned out the man was defending himself with a regular tennis racket and telling the monster to go away. The woman he was protecting trembled with fear, as did the child he was holding in his arms. The guy didn't realize what that thing was. If he was used to the others, this was new to him. But our hero didn't hesitate and grabbed the bat that the guy had in his hands. The racket with which the man was swinging broke, as expected, and the monster pounced on him. He tried to save him in time by pouncing on the monster with the hope of defeating it. Although the monster was strong, it realized what was going on and wanted to do something about it. But it didn't have enough time. Our hero hit it in the face with the bat as hard as he could and killed it, breaking such a monster. At the first blow, a second one followed because the monster could not be knocked down to the ground with a single strike. It felt as if he was hitting a real mountain, and that scared him and made him less confident. When he tried to attack again, the monster stopped receiving blows and grabbed this bat. He only held the bat with one hand. It was like a toy to him, not dangerous. He immediately swung the other arm, and a blow from such a monster could have been deadly. But our hero once again demonstrated his incredible skills and dodged with a somersault. His new weapon was the base of a quite sharp tennis racket, and he took advantage of it by stabbing the monster in several places, dodging attacks, and even attempting a controlled blow to the vulnerable eye of the monster. However, it turned out that he missed the target. Thanks to this attack, the monster's visibility worsened significantly. Our hero picked up the bat, determined to use the heroic phrase "die in hell" one last time to seem cool. However, the monster also prepared to attack, realizing that the fight was not yet over. It sharply tilted its head backward, also inclining its body, and began to growl fiercely. Our hero and the bat-carrying boy could not understand what was happening. The boy was confused, not knowing what the hell was going on, as his body did not move and trembled. But our hero was not going to give up, even though he realized that things were going very bad, and his chances of success were diminishing. Despite the missing eye, the monster swung its huge, strong arm, and even for our hero, it was difficult to contain it. He coughed, and the blow came onto the bat, but he could not withstand such a hit for long, and he was already bent. When the bat failed, it hit our hero, sending him flying against the store shelves. In this battle, the monster emerged victorious, defeating his enemy with little difficulty. It then turned its attention to the paralyzed boy, who was trembling in fear. It grabbed the tennis racket's handle from the boy's eye without showing any sign of pain, which was very disturbing for the boy, who knew he had to keep training. But the monster kept approaching, and the man with the racket sat there, desperate and trembling. All he wanted was someone to save his baby. He didn't care about anything else. Meanwhile, he tried to move to do something, trying to move with all his might, realizing that no one could save them, and he had to act. The boy managed to adopt a sort of pose and started shouting as much as he could to boost his confidence. But that man, his wife, and his son were desperate and could not believe they would survive. The boy could not understand what was happening. He felt as if every cell was filled with energy, resembling an internal conflagration. He dared to raise the bat, even though the enemy inspired fear. For a second, he thought that maybe in that state he could defeat such a monster. Unexpectedly, our hero emerged unharmed and attacked the monster from behind, starting to strangle it with a cord. He held the monster. It was truly astonishing, and the boy was relieved that his boss was alive. The monster, of course, tried with all its might to break free, but it couldn't, and our hero was surprised that he could still withstand the immense force the monster was exerting. So he quickly made the decision to finish it. He turned his back and started pressing forward, leaning his legs against the monster's back. It was clear that he couldn't defeat the monster with a single lash. So our hero asked the boy if he was out of it, or if he had the matter in his hands. The boy realized he had to help and save them all. There was no time to act like a kid anymore. He ran straight towards the monster. Even though his bat was half broken and shortened, he could still do something about it. He struck as hard as he could. He still needed his baseball skills in a battle against blue blood monsters. Blood was shed, which only meant one thing: the victory of these two heroes. For the people who sought refuge in this building, it was a shelter where they could live, but the fear didn't leave any of them. Some were solitary, only eating and sleeping. They had nothing to lose. Others were families who gathered and supported each other. And to all these people, our hero and the boy who had just defeated the monster arrived. People started looking at them because they were interested. These 7 hours were comparable to a decade. The first half of his life had been full of small and big problems, but nothing compared to the last minute. The name of our hero is Sharon, and the boy was curious about his origin. He was an unusual man, and even though they were close, it was hard to get along with him. He loves coffee. At the moment, there are only about 100 people alive. The dead overlook the living. If it weren't for Sharon, who knows how many more people would have died. He probably would have died too. He was evacuating the defenseless and killing the creatures. There was no confusion in his gaze, only confidence. Panic overcame everyone, but he easily took care of one department after another, as if he was used to such a life. The situation seemed absurd. Sharon asked the boy to take off his gloves, and both of them had some marks on their hands. They all became special people, awakened. Not much is known about them yet, but 4 to 5% of people wake up in their situation. They need to transmit information quickly, so they will give it a somewhat complicated name. It is assumed that the power they obtained had something to do with it. The boy did not think he would achieve it so easily. With that power, one could easily reach the big leagues, and even more surprisingly, with the phone's ability to see the awakened and monster's characteristics, Ron's abilities were far superior to the boy's. Every day he hangs out at a cyber cafe, and now he is in the game. Sharon called him Fancy 100 and asked to have all those creatures transferred to the meat section of the department stores, which surprised Fancy 100 a lot. He didn't know what Ron was looking for, but then he realized that Ron was covered in blood and got a general idea of what this human-like creature was for. He could no longer be called human, and Sharon gathered the cutting tools and shared with everyone the information he received. This caused a lot of panic among the familiar people. Despite the panic, the people believed the man before them, as he had saved them all from death. If it weren't for him, most people would truly have died at the hands of monsters. In this situation, he is a true hero. Sharon had just taught a lesson to the three bastards who wanted to take advantage of the general excitement, and because of that, people trusted him even more. In fact, even if he didn't use his ability, he could easily overpower the three. Now it's 22:33, and I'm going to tell you his situation at this moment. A girl approached him and said she had an interesting mark and wanted to talk to him about it. "What's the pattern?" she asked. Fancy suddenly remembered this girl, whom he once bravely confronted with NLJ in front of his eyes. Sharon started saying that to survive, you have to think only of yourself, but he will tell them all about these threats because he sees no point in hiding this information. The girl wanted to know what the crystals were, so Fancy 100 began to explain that he had given them that name. Sharon said it would help with communication. A crystal is a type of stone that can be found in a monster's body. As Sharon said, each tissue would show the special characteristics and abilities of its owner, and they could also see the monster's statistics. The phone showed that they needed to obtain a crystal to improve their own abilities. Sharon said they couldn't stay here, but she argued that they could hold on for a couple of days and be rescued. Sharon explained that it was a temporary resting place, not suitable for a long stay, and there was no need to think about rescue. The outside was much worse than theirs. The girl asked how he could know what was outside if they were in the basement of a mall. 6 hours had passed, and nobody, including the rescue team, had entered here, which meant they had no way to get in, and communications were cut off. They must leave this place and get to the nearest subway station, at which point the girl was very surprised. Monsters are suddenly appearing. Their past locations have been discovered since they were able to get in through the entrance. A known problem is confirmed. They must leave immediately. The girl responded that everyone is very tired and can't see that there are many elderly and injured people here. Then Sharon noticed something bad, so he ordered people to quickly move away from the entrance. The entrance literally vomited, and people started to fall, and the door shrapnel flew straight at them. Sharon realized that this was bad, very bad, because even a normal monster he was fighting against wouldn't be able to knock down this door. It was in fact a monster among monsters, the embodiment of a true monster that seemed invincible. He knew from the look of this monster that it was different and that it was bad. This monster immediately started killing everyone around him. Sharon realized that he couldn't be delayed, so he started using his abilities, and the monster was surprised by it because the next second he was literally slammed against the wall, damaging it with his body. Yes, he was really strong, so strong that he could kill 100 people, even 1,000, without any problem. But Sharon was no weakling, and he had already defeated many creatures, although none of them were as strong as this one. But this monster came just in time for Sharon to test his new abilities, which he had never been able to try with anyone before. This girl, Fancy 100, and the rest of the people saw how Sharon was fighting, and they were surprised at such strength. Like two damn Tyrones, Tabutra Rex reappeared. The girl admitted that it's not safe to stay here, that it's not safe now, and she won't argue anymore. The monster wouldn't give up and continued to do everything possible to escape from Sharon's unusual grip on him. Although Sharon wasn't easy, and people thought he could easily break the neck as he could bend iron, he wouldn't last long either. He also realized that. So he ordered Fancy 100 to get everyone out of here immediately, or it would be the end of them all. Of course, he didn't want to leave his first companion in this apocalypse, but seeing this monster, anyone would realize they had to flee. The monster started to free himself from Sharon's grip as his strength was running out and he couldn't hold on anymore. His strength had run out, and now the monster was going to attack. So Sharon had to prepare to counterattack. Fancy 100 still didn't launch it and hit this monster with a dumbbell right in the face, but it wouldn't work. After the punch, he thought he hit the bullseye, and that punch had an effect on this monster. They had a chance to win. But it turns out that reality is different. Fancy 100 screams at him to be careful. His dumbbell didn't do any damage. It broke against this monster, making 100 completely misinterpret it. The monster immediately started attacking him. 100 tried to block with his hand, but the impact of such a monster was no weaker than that of a truck at full speed. So he literally went flying from that punch, even though he blocked it. Luckily, he hit the shelves and not the concrete wall. He was panicked after seeing the power of this monster. What happened to Fancy 100 was very painful and horrible. Sharon realized he had miscalculated and quickly got tired. Now because of him, everyone is in danger. They have to do something urgently. The monster was heading directly towards him, and he prepared to perform some kind of grip that could help remedy the situation. And then he noticed something incredible that not only surprised him, but also he scared him, the soldier with vast experience. He even made him step back and started using his ability again as he prepared for what was coming. Then, using that power, he began throwing something from above, most likely to drop it onto the monster. The monster tried to grab Sharon with its enormous hands, but his excellent reflexes saved him and dust rose as he jumped again. Something broke, raising a cloud of dust, but Sharon managed to hold onto a pipe from above. This monster literally broke several walls with its body. It was stronger than concrete and even iron, with tremendous force. Right after that, Sharon realized what had happened, and that it was time to descend and continue executing his plan. He rushed to the side and picked up a can containing gasoline, which could easily ignite. So, Yaron immediately threw this can through the holes in the walls, aiming at the monster, and he took out a lighter and threw it after the can. The main thing was that the lighter didn't go out, and the entire plan worked because there was no backup. There was an explosion just under that monster, and obviously, it had to endure at least that attack. People were scared by the explosion and wondered if the monster was still alive, and if it could cause a fire that would kill them. After dealing with the monster, or at least stopping it, Sharon headed toward Fancy 100, who lay unconscious in the arms of that woman. He was still conscious, and the girl asked if he was okay, and Sharon asked if he could move, to which he responded that he was in pain. Fancy 100 recovered and said everything was fine, and the girl feared that the hit might have punctured his lung, but it seemed not. Sharon realized he was severely injured, but recovered quickly. Apparently, it wasn't a coincidence that he had easily gotten up after being hit. The girl asked again if he was okay, and how he had healed so quickly, to which he said he was still in pain. But he was better. Sharon realized he had to hurry, so he told her they would talk about it later and asked if he could walk. It's dangerous here, and Fancy 100 should leave. They also needed to find out if this girl named Linny Yue could drive, and it turned out she could. That was great. They would leave, find a car, and wait there. Sharon would stay and deal with the monster, and they would leave. Certainly, a ruptured can wouldn't prevent them from killing a monster like this for long. Sharon became increasingly worried, unable to understand why they were frozen. Then he ordered them to leave quickly. People also got scared because they realized that, even though it was useless, how could they face it? This monster seemed incredibly terrifying, as if it were the embodiment of evil. Sharon realized he hadn't been hit at all, but it was a good thing that everyone had already started to run away. Of course, none of them wanted to leave Sharon alone, especially Fancy 100, but there was no other choice. Who else would lead and organize the people if not them? Panic overcame the people again, who were agitated, but it was understandable. Everyone tried to survive, protect their lives, and possibly their families. Fancy felt somewhat inadequate during the consecutive battles with Sharon, but he had learned to fight and defeated him on the first try. Everyone started heading to the exit they found, thanks to that woman and Fancy 100. At the same time, Sharon was fighting that monster, preventing it from following and harming them. That was his main goal, and despite the fear or risk of death, he kept fighting for complete strangers. He felt responsible for them, at least because he had already killed the same complete strangers before. It didn't fit. Sharon had already broken plenty of sharp weapons against the body of this monster, and all were useless, as if he were hitting a stone. But he wouldn't give up, and kept fighting against it with new weapons he found, buying the most time. Fancy 100 and Linny Yue were there with an incomprehensible expression on their faces because they had seen something terrible and terrifying, and this was their city. It scared all the people, who rushed out of the underground mall because it was completely destroyed. Most cars were abandoned or simply destroyed by the monsters, and smoke accompanied the fire coming out of many houses. People stopped being afraid and started panicking. Some were looking aimlessly, crying, thinking it was the end. Fancy 100 noticed that Linny Yu was looking for something, so he asked what she was looking for, but she told him not to interfere and to take care of the others. She found what she was looking for, a bus that could accommodate all these people to transport them to a safe place. As they ran toward it, something creaked. Suddenly, behind them, the same monster that had fallen through the window appeared for some reason, and Sharon was in full flight, trying to finish it off with another blade. Yes, he was the one who threw it out the window. It was a battle of equals. Despite falling from such a height, Jaren wasn't afraid. He did it because he knew he would survive, and in any case, his main goal was not to save his life, but to save others. They fell right on top of the car, right next to all the people, and crushed that car literally to pulp, as if it were made of cardboard or Fancy 100 paper lining. Fancy and Lining noticed it and realized that it was bad since the monster was close to the people, and Rhonda, who had fallen from such a height, was dangerous to stay near that monster. So, Sharon had to roll a little away from him, but he was still injured. The monster itself stood up from the car as if nothing happened, and it barely noticed it because it was too early to rest. When this monster stood up completely, it seemed even bigger than before and was ready to kill everyone right now. Everyone was standing there, looking at this, and Sharon noticed it and started telling them that they were fools. They couldn't stay separated there. They should run. Fancy and Lining realized they were in a state of stupor when they saw this, and thanks to Sharon they were able to regain their senses and continue with their tasks. Sharon grabbed a traffic sign and ripped it out of the ground with a concrete base. How much strength does it take to do that? Then he confidently told this monster to show what it's made of. Immediately after saying that, Sharon lunged at him with a traffic sign in his hands as a weapon against the monster. Would it even work at that moment? Fancy always asked the kid if she knew how to drive a bus, to which she replied that she didn't, but it was practically the same as driving a regular car, and that wasn't the problem right now. They were lucky, and found the key in that car, which meant they could get out of there and save all the people who were still alive. Sharon was hitting the monster with the metal pipe of the traffic sign, and surprisingly, it was quite effective. But at a moment when Sharon was hitting it again, the monster was able to grab that pipe and throw Sharon away with it. The people who were watching thought it was amazing and couldn't realize how strong this monster was to do such things with such ease. Sharon was amused and scared at the same time. The fact that this monster was still alive, and now without that pipe. The advantage it was not on their side. The monster launched an attack. It had rum yesterday like a spear, but it dodged it. At that moment, something happened. Sharon and the beast heard the same thing. Sharon was happy about it, very happy about it. Fancy and I were driving the bus at full speed, heading straight towards Charon. The monster, realizing their plan, immediately dodged the bus by jumping aside, but it didn't do it in time. The monster wouldn't retreat. On the contrary, it absorbed the blow and tried to stop the bus with all its strength. Fancy and I didn't give up and continued pressing the accelerator, driving as fast as possible. Fancy 100 realized that the monster didn't care and was slowing down the bus. So, she asked the beginning to step on the accelerator, but she said she had already done it while the monster tried to hold the bus. Sharon realized that he had to help, so he started using his strength. He knows that a bus blow won't kill a monster like this, but while Sharon is busy, he can twist its neck with his ability. The monster was no longer holding the bus, it simply lifted it. It was an incredible sight, but it really did it. It lifted a bus that was traveling at full speed. Fancy 100 was very scared about this and didn't know what to do. So he put his arm around Lin Shu, who begged him to let go because he couldn't breathe. Sharon told the monster to say goodbye and started twisting its neck. It started cracking and twisting out of place. The whole village was astonished once again, and hope could be seen in their eyes. Hope for success, for victory, for staying alive when they saw that the bus was heading straight towards some building, and so was the monster. But they broke its neck. They wanted to believe it was finished after that. Sharon briefly used his power to finish the job and ensure they won the game. But then he let go anyway, realizing what they had done. After all, finally letting out a sigh of relief. He really breathed a sigh of relief. He tried to commit suicide, but by avoiding imminent death, he became happier. Sharon couldn't accept his current self, his desires, so he kept blaming himself, claiming he was useless. His inner world was in chaos, and he decided that he couldn't go on like this. He had to change. It was tough for everyone around him, but especially for him. Fancy always protected Lin and me with his body. When they crashed into this store, putting themselves in great danger, he asked her if she was okay, to which she replied that he had almost killed her twice. So he asked her to get up or he would crush her. He was relieved that Lin was fine, and I was curious about the monster. The result of his battle, Fancy cheerfully replied, was that he had killed that thing with his own hands. When they got out, she felt dizzy, and he told her to be careful, but she said it was nothing, so he let her go away from him. Fancy sent Sharon, who stood over the monster's corpse while holding an axe. So she started asking him not to be angry that they hadn't killed that monster. However, he ignored them and started chopping it with the axe, leaving them astonished and horrified because they couldn't expect something like that. So they decided to ask him what he was doing, why he was cutting the body of a dead monster. "Is it necessary?" Sharon asked. He spoke up and explained that in recent days, his head had been filled with rosy dreams that would never come true. But that thing slapped Lin and brought her back to reality. She wanted to scream with all her might, but she didn't. She must not be afraid. His reasons soon became clear to her. Due to this unusual atmosphere, she didn't dare to utter a single word, although she had many in her head. Sharon ate that crystal and continued pondering. He had spent 3 years in practice, doing various jobs, and had seen many corpses in his life. Sharon had the stench of death and could say one thing: creepy. Creepy for sure, but it was true. Sharon looked like a man, but inside he was no longer a man. He had become a monster. About our hero's current characteristics, we are told that Sharon has basic properties. Abilities 28, physical strength 23, special strength F. Improvement level, supernatural strength F. Level, thought power A. Level, physical defense F. Level, and so on. Lin has basic properties. Ability 11, physical strength 14, special power supernatural strength C level, magical resistance F level, physical defense level F. Some abilities are missing. Sharon has surpassed several levels, and Lin and I also have good special powers. Physical strength is superior to Fancy, 100. Sharon collects essential items, mainly food, drinks, medicines, and other things needed to survive in those conditions. He also wore dark, non-reflective gloves and hats, and the food he carried had a long shelf life and could be easily transported. They followed his example and helped by collecting the same things Sharon had collected. After the assembly, they went to the town hall with the others. Fortunately, there were no creatures there, and they could pass through together, albeit cautiously. Everyone sighed in relief, but Sharon suggested moving on. This time, he only allowed those who were awake to go with him, but he didn't force anyone. However, most people wanted to go with him because they realized they couldn't survive without them. What would they do when they left? The ordinary people who didn't go with them cursed them all the time. Nevertheless, several people thanked Sharon, hoping he would stay with them to survive the disaster by working together. But still, he left silently. Fancy, Lin, and I went with him. I didn't even think about staying with those people to protect them from the monsters they might encounter. Lin and I don't think he is heartless. There's enough food, medicine, and weapons at the town hall. They reinforced the defensive line with carts and fire doors and found an underground passage. Though it's not clear what's happening outside, they are taking a great risk. But they can't stay here waiting for help. In this situation, taking all the people with them would be seeking death. At least I tried to convince myself of that, to feel a little better about the fact that we had left those people, and now only luck would help us. Now they are heading to the military district. There must be a police station on the way. They'll find weapons there. That was Sharon's plan for now, though it's not clear if the weapons will work against the monsters. Somehow, going forward, Fancy, Lin, and I made sense. They will go behind and link between them. Remember to look around, otherwise, they might not notice the creature and be attacked suddenly. The slightest mistake could lead them to death, so they must stay alert before reaching their objective. When they entered the police station, all the police officers were dead. Apparently their batons didn't work against the monsters. One of them died about 6 or 7 hours ago. Cause of death: a bullet pierced through him. Fancy 100 ordered to remove the body and block the doors with windows. He complied without hesitation. Linny and I were thinking about what was wrong. It felt as if there was something important in the bag that Fancy 100 was carrying. When he opened the bag, he saw something that really surprised him. Sharon quickly approached her and grabbed her shoulder, making Fancy 100 unaware of what was happening. He apologized for reacting so violently, saying it wasn't intentional, and asked to see something. He showed them the cup, to which Fancy 100 said it was just a worn-out cup, but she also thought so at first. However, a strange feeling left her. Everyone looked at the picture that Linny and I were showing, and she handed it to Ron. It was a level 7 God-healing cup with a value toaster. Properties: it creates healing blessed water with supernatural power. Fancy 100 realized it seemed to be a very useful thing, and they were really lucky. Sharon simply remained silent. He considered such behavior to be childish, to which he apologized, saying he was too excited. The three stood around, and Linny and I tried to use the bowl somehow. It began to glow yellow, and by Linny Yu's expression, it could be seen that she was really getting tired. Something filled the bowl, which surprised Fancy 100 a lot. It was truly unusual. After that, Linny and I laughed, and it was hard for her. Fancy 100 was afraid for her, so he asked if she was okay. Even Sharon was concerned, and asked if it was normal. It seemed too physically demanding, to which she said it felt like coming back from the dead. The wound began to heal thanks to the liquid from this bowl, and the surprise was unmatched. It was amazing. It seems that Linny and I are her healers now because this liquid really heals wounds very quickly. Fancy 100 realized that, once again, he was being too emotional and he scolded himself. However, he only said that the risks were great, but the rewards were not bad either. Apparently, after the military district, the next stop is the museum. She told him to shut up, to which he replied that he would take it as a compliment. SWM-60 has 5 bullets inside. Aim at the cannon's mouth, only on the target. Try to aim at the head and chest. Yes, finally they have a firearm. Fancy 100 thought it was a bad idea, and Linny and I didn't know if he would be able to use this weapon. Sharon started saying that he shouldn't exert himself too much at this moment, so it's better to stop. He interrupted abruptly and stopped them standing there, sweating. Linny and I also noticed this, and it was starting to make both of them uncomfortable. From this, they both fell to the floor, writhing in pain and clutching their hearts. Everyone felt very bad about it, but because of Sharon, he realized that things were very bad. So he hurried to get out of this room as fast as he could to get to the bottom of this. Looking up, he noticed something. Although it was quite dark outside, and the city lights weren't working, he could easily see this thing flying in the sky. By its appearance, it was an incredibly powerful monster, many times stronger even than the one they killed at the mall. It looked like a dragon flying in the sky, and its strength was simply immense. Would they be able to defeat it in battle? It had so much power that even he was afraid of such a thing. Running towards his companions, he saw that they were still lying on the floor, writhing in pain. Fancy 100 said he was fine. There was no need to worry about him, but he had to check on Linny. She was much worse than Fancy 100, so Sharon had to give her artificial respiration. Otherwise, she would have died. Then he started cardiopulmonary resuscitation to make her heart work and continue pumping blood. Her heart was still beating, but she couldn't breathe. The usual methods weren't working, and then Sharon noticed the bowl. He let them see the liquid inside the bowl because he had no other choice. It was a calculation based on past experience and luck. After that, both of them started coughing. Some kind of process has apparently started, really good or bad. It is not known yet. Fancy 100 couldn't understand what had happened. Suddenly he began to gasp, and Linny and I couldn't think of anything at all. But recalling the creature and the other dangers, Sharon decided they would take a break for a while, and then they would continue and change plans for the moment. Meanwhile, Fancy 100, Linny and I were not sleeping, just resting. And Sharon was on guard as usual, as the danger could be waiting for us anywhere. The clock in this room was eating Aaron's brain. He looked like a deranged killer who had lost the sense of life, who had lost himself. In the morning, they were already crushing the next monsters. Fortunately, they weren't too strong, and our group handled them easily. For Fancy 100, something was a significant breakthrough. Not only did he become stronger, but he also used that strength, which was really helpful. After thinking about this, he told Sharon that no one was left, but Sharon decided to take a look anyway. After making sure that no one else was left, he started tearing apart those monsters, and Linny and I argued that they could attract the monsters that way. Why not use the power of thought? He explained that no one had mastered the powers to perfection yet, and if you use them incorrectly, you could get hurt. Besides, if there was a stronger creature here, this crowd wouldn't dare to be here once they had eaten all the crystals. They should leave immediately. Meanwhile, the boy thought that these crystals had been spinning in vain for half an hour, but it was as if Chicharin was specifically looking for monsters to collect more crystals and become stronger. That's right, he realized that he had to hunt the weaker creatures. If they gradually increased their strength, someday they could stay behind somewhere in the city. A major battle had begun, and if it was living people fighting monsters, someone other than Sharon and his team were men in uniform, which meant the army hadn't fallen yet. They were shooting the creatures with machine guns and making some progress. However, the monsters wouldn't give up, so they kept coming. But with such weapons, it was difficult for them to defeat them. Even the numbers favored the bullets, piercing the skin of those creatures, although they weren't the strongest of their kind, and if they faced someone stronger, they would fall sooner or later. Even if they maintained the defensive line, a stronger monster came who was very dangerous. The Olots realized that it was stronger than the others. It was the fat one. However, one of them realized that they couldn't lower their guard, so he told them not to be idiots and to shoot. All these bullets began to hit this monster. That would stop him. No one was sure, so the commander ordered to throw a grenade. They prepared to throw it, and then they really started throwing grenades that exploded next to this monster. One of the grenades hit its target, hitting him on the shoulder, setting him on fire. This option hurt him, but all this was futile because the wounds of this monster kept healing, and not even a grenade was of any use. What were they going to do? The soldiers couldn't understand what was happening because it was getting closer and closer to them. They were gripped by fear and panic, but who could save them? They themselves were soldiers. This monster began grabbing the soldiers by the head, throwing them around, breaking their barricade. They were like toy soldiers to him because he was able to make his way and keep the soldiers at bay. All the other monsters also started attacking, not missing the opportunity and helping their fellow monster. The monster continued to disperse all the soldiers, killing them indiscriminately. This monster was quite strong. Who knows if the team could handle him? The soldiers tried to maintain their defenses, so they gave the order to move to the next line of defense to maintain at least some resistance to the monsters. They began trying to attack their captain, but he is the most experienced and strongest soldier of them all, who was in command, and without him, they would be finished. The captain dodged the attack of this monster and started shooting at him, although he realized it was absolutely useless. On the other side, a weaker monster started attacking him. The captain let his guard down, but still managed to dodge the attack. While dealing with that little monster, the larger monster had already gotten very close to the captain. Its hand was already literally on his head. Suddenly, that monster stopped. Yes, it was Sharon, who arrived at this battlefield and used his power to stop the monster. All the soldiers were confused and couldn't understand what kind of person he was and how he was doing it, stopping all the monsters behind him, which were dead. This surprised the soldiers even more. How could he kill them all in an instant? The captain asked Sharon who he was, but Sharon responded in his style for the captain to leave unless he wanted to die. Of course, at the same time, Fancy 100 began attacking the monster, and the captain reacted and dodged it with a somersault. He received blow after blow, and as we can see, it worked. Unlike bullets and grenades, it worked. But how long would it last? The captain was in shock. It was simply impossible. All the firepower of a machine gun failed, and a boy with a bat was beating them up. Sharon ordered Fancy to get out of there quickly, and of course, he obeyed unconditionally, and he grabbed the captain to escape with him, asking what he was doing and why they had to run. Everything was fine, and he was handling the monster. No, the monster's face was literally contorted by those bat blows, although it didn't receive much real damage. Sharon was setting his plan in motion. Just like with that monster in the shopping mall, he used a gasoline can and threw it at the monster, and right after, a lighter. He used his power to amplify the explosion and restrain the monster because they didn't have time for it. The monster was right in the center of the explosion, and it seemed to be very effective against it. Unlike the explosion caused by the grenade, the monster could heal, and if it kept burning constantly, it wouldn't have time to regenerate. The point was that the clay hardens when it comes into contact with fire, which is why fire is particularly effective against this monster. Something was wrong with Charon's arm. It hurt, but he could tolerate the pain. The fire had stopped for a long time, but the monster was still on fire. Now it had turned into burnt clay, which was a good sign for Charon's team. Charon immediately walked towards that monster. His hand became even darker. Apparently, this was his new ability, hitting. This monster literally began to crumble, and a bunch of cement pieces fell off. So, it's a victory. Fancy 100 realized that this was a new ability, and it was so cool. He could break cement with bare hands. The cool thing is, of course, everyone was very surprised by it. The captain couldn't tell if Charon was a human or not, because humans simply couldn't do that. They couldn't have a differently colored hand or use any kind of telekinesis. The captain began to explain that all those monsters appeared suddenly. Yesterday afternoon, a whole horde of them attacked the place where they were, and the untrained officers were immediately killed. That's why they literally had no chance of winning against such monsters. Later, the communication was cut off. The enemy defeated the entire command regiment, which was very bad for the remaining soldiers. Fear of the enemy eventually led to a loss of morale among the soldiers. Charon managed to gather the remnants of the troops and maintain the defense line. But as he saw the fighters dying, he gradually began to feel weak and feared that he would also die soon. Everyone looked at Charon, unable to understand how such people could exist. A handful of soldiers couldn't confront the monsters, but he and his two companions, without firearms, managed to face them. That was when he met Charon. When all his soldiers were dying and she herself was one step away from death, it turned out she saved him. Charon asked, calling her junior lieutenant, if she was in charge here, and as expected, the answer was positive. He told them to quickly equip themselves with the necessary weapons, as they had to get rid of the rest of the monsters. They had a total of 33 survivors, 10 of them unharmed. They had to prepare for another battle that was about to begin, after which roles had to be assigned. Linny and I would take care of the wounded, and the rest, including Fancy 100, would protect the main force and his companions. Without hesitation, everyone agreed. The lieutenant objected to not rushing. After all, they didn't even know who this was. These monsters are more organized than before, and he supposed there's a commander among them. "That means what?" asked the lieutenant. Charon began to explain that if they're not destroyed at the root, they'll attack again. They can't waste time. They must start gathering. As soon as the lieutenant tried to object, Charon said they could introduce themselves later. No need to waste time. Everyone pretended to face an army of these monsters with a commander. Charon, from that moment on, was in charge of the operation and its success. Charon and the lieutenant had to go as well. No one could delay that. This made the lieutenant even more angry. He couldn't even oppose her. And so, the battle began. They shot at every monster that crossed their path. They didn't slow down even for a second, although the opponents greatly outnumbered them. It was never a reason to retreat. At least they didn't stop. Charon was superhuman. Even before all this chaos, the apocalypse began before he discovered his superior abilities and skills thanks to the crystals. He was strong. Even in the past, his strength was unusually human. His reflexes, his battle and defense skills, everything was first class. He used to be a very skilled soldier. The lieutenant had also noticed his abilities before, but now she also saw that his aim was first class and wondered who he was. Anyway, Charon realized that there was going to be an explosion that would hit them both, so he grabbed the lieutenant and threw him to the ground. The explosion broke the wall, or rather, it was designed to break it, while the lieutenant was shocked. Charon climbed up, realizing what awaited them was a completely new monster, unknown to them, which looked like some kind of shaman or sorcerer. With a bunch of subordinates, Charon was surprised to see the monster. He expected to see a monster like the one in the shopping center, but the lieutenant thought it was a bomb. This monster stared at them with incredible anger, cruelty, and thirst for blood. It was evident that it was definitely an uncommon monster, but that's what Ron was looking for, and the lieutenant felt a sense of oppression and pressure. Even though it was just a dirty thing, he believed that he couldn't handle firearms and wouldn't slow down. So he asked Charon to help him aim at the leader and shoot. The lieutenant asked him to wait. However, it was impossible to slow down. The shaman had sent his army directly against them because if they couldn't deal with them, it made no sense to fight them. However, this didn't scare Charon in the least, and he just laughed while starting to use his power in the knife he held in his hands. He decided not to fight with this knife but to throw it, and thanks to the force he put into it, the knife flew much faster than usual. He threw the knife straight at the monster, and although the knife broke, the monster's shaman staff also broke. So it was worth it. and immediately after that, Charon had already stealthily run towards the monster to strike another blow. Perhaps even a controlling blow due to the surprise. According to Charon, the situation had changed. All the enemies in the barracks had been destroyed, and they had regained the lost ground, which was very good news under Charon's command. Everything was moving quickly. The soldiers were also clearing the fronts at a fast pace, killing monsters one after another. The doctor they had was. The lieutenant didn't understand with what mysterious power he was treating the wounded. Could such medicine even exist? They also organized an arms depot and replaced the equipment. All the soldiers were surprised at how easily Fancy carried 2 boxes on one shoulder. It seemed really strange to Charon, and very suspicious. There were more and more reasons every second to ask him who he was. When he tried to approach, Charon addressed her as a subordinate lieutenant, and told her she could ask whatever she wanted, but wouldn't have a chance to do so later. He said he wanted to thank her, but how did he know her name? They had seen each other somewhere before. The former commander of the military district of the Capital Brigade, the general. "Is your grandfather?" he asked. Then he began to say that 5 years ago, he met the division general in the military district, so she was also there when he said that. Apparently, the lieutenant began to remember what he was talking about. An old man was saying that Iran was first, and their current lieutenant was about to become a junior lieutenant. They would have a chance to get to know each other later. Then they greeted each other and never thought they would meet, especially in these circumstances. The lieutenant wanted to ask the commander who they were because at least they seemed very strange to be soldiers. However, he told her not to ask who they were, and to try not to cross paths with them again, which left her even more confused. The commander knew that this group had no units or ranks. They were like hungry wolves on the battlefield who would follow any order without question. The lieutenant recalled all of that and realized that indeed, he was a soldier and they already knew each other. But he could be trusted in these circumstances. Also, he was a member of the special unit that was taboo for commanders in military circles. Being a ranger, it proved that she must have heard something about the brigade. She had already removed the hood and approached her, making the lieutenant nervous as she wasn't sure what he was looking for. But it turned out he was asking about some kind of agreement and also asked her to gather all the soldiers. Charon was obviously plotting something. When they gathered all the soldiers, it turned out that Charon wanted to create some kind of special unit. This was the deal he mentioned before. They could join or stay here and guard the military camp. And the lieutenant realized she didn't have many options. She had to think it over. Then, Charon started to tell them that this catastrophe had affected the whole country, and apparently, other places had been affected as badly as this one. Now there was no communication, and the military had a hard time controlling the situation. The soldiers couldn't believe it, and thought it couldn't be true. The lieutenant could choose to believe or not to believe Charon. It was her choice. But one thing was clear, how difficult it was for her to choose between these options. But they were afraid to admit it, to speak the truth, what was going on in their minds. The lieutenant realized that at that moment, she was quickly adapting to the new world, and was enthusiastically killing more formidable monsters than they had seen recently. After that, she decided to ask them what they would gain if they joined them. What would be the benefit of doing so? Charon explained that if they joined them, they would get all the information he knew and an extra opportunity. If they survive, they are still human beings, and with their current abilities and knowledge of the world, they cannot help anyone. So it was foolish to refuse. All the soldiers sat silently in the car driven by Charon. Now they had a better chance of survival than before. That's how they started gathering information from Charon's. They still need more data. This problem is causing headaches for both 100 Inches fans and Linny and me. They explained everything they knew to the soldiers, and Fancy said that although it was still hard to believe, it was true. In normal circumstances, the lieutenant would have sent him to a mental institution. But the experiences of the last few days give no reason to doubt the truthfulness of his information. For some unknown reason, after the sudden appearance of monsters in human camps, the awakened ones have started to appear. Now, besides Charon and his friends, a junior lieutenant and 2 other military personnel have also become such beings. Only the pattern distinguishes them from regular humans. By killing monsters and absorbing crystals, they can increase their statistics. Monsters have different levels and abilities. By consuming crystals from a specific monster, you can increase certain characteristics. You can find out more about this through the phone, The Duende crystal gives a slight increase in basic property values. The Orc crystal provides a significant increase in basic property values, but it also becomes a bit more challenging to defeat. The Black Orc crystal, after absorption, enhances abilities and physical strength. It boosts ability reinforcement and increases physical defense from abilities. The Clay Monster crystal, after absorption, enhances basic abilities or ability physical defense. Reinforcement can increase speed. The Chamanga Ablin crystal, upon absorption, boosts the ability of supernatural power, magical experience, and ancestral vision ability. It can be used to obtain a more potent item in advance. You can also swallow dozens of magical crystals, including Supreme Monster Stones. Its abilities are level 69, physical strength is 45, improvement of special force level E, supernatural force level E, and abilities are level 6 Dragon Scales, level 6 Regeneration, and level 6 Ancestral Vision. Fancy. 100 Linny and I also absorbed a lot of crystals. We convinced the junior lieutenant and other awakened ones to do the same. Everyone remained silent. No one complained. It turned out that monster remains could be utilized, and were very helpful. For example, the pill that Linny and I made with the horn of a skillful Chamanga, the flesh of a clay monster, and the healing bowl of a god. The Chamanga Ablin's horn had a mysterious power after absorption. It's possible to utilize part of Chamanga Ablin's power. The flesh of the clay monster can regenerate rapidly upon absorption, which results in slightly increased resistance to fear, recovery ability, and so on. A professionally trained team can handle 100 monsters, but sometimes there are superior monsters among them. Their roars and pressure can affect even the awakened ones. It's not something that can be overcome with mental or physical strength alone. Special abilities are required to endure fear and recover quickly. Their firepower will increase significantly if the soldiers and weak awakened ones can resist fear. Sharon turned to the junior lieutenant and said that if they encounter higher-level monsters than the soldiers can handle, they should take those pills later. Fancy, 100 Lini, and I should receive uniforms, armored vests, and be taught how to shoot. Military uniforms are specially designed for the battlefield. If they don't wear them, they can easily become a target for these things. People who have never wielded a weapon will only bring trouble to the squad, so they should only use abilities and weapons in emergency situations. They changed clothes, and Fancy and 100 said they didn't intend to put on the uniform they had always dreamed of wearing in such a situation. Then they asked if Sharon wanted Fancy to propose a name for the team. They thought it was important. To which Sharon replied that since he had taken on the job, he had to decide for himself. He got excited and said that he had actually already thought of everything, the bright path of morality lurking in the shadows. And then he interrupted with a suggestion for the team's name. Modus operandi.